Are we ready? Good. I'm recording. Yay. Okay. Hi, everyone. How are we? So, this is probably going to be one of my heavier videos. The reason I say heavier is because it has like fear in it. So, basically, conversation. I don't know, man. The same day I was actually having a conversation with my dad, I went and we were hanging out in the mountains and we chilled. We saw my aunts and we saw a bit of family, and I got excited and everything like this. It was funny because like when we talked together, he started picking the habit of recording us because I started recording at one point. We have like intense discussions, and he allows me to kind of like go through stuff. For him, they're interesting, right? Like, what would you want to be thinking about? And I asked him that once. It was like, what would you want to talk about? And he looked at me. He goes like, I don't know. He's peaceful enough to have everything in his life kind of sorted and sorted mentally, right? Like if everything is not actually within, like it's a stoic thing. If it's beyond your control, then why the fuck are you involved in it? Like, there's no point like being anxious about it or anything. It's beyond your control. Allow it to happen and do your best in making sure it happens better or whatever it is that you can do. But so I was standing there and I think I was having a conversation with him towards about how sometimes I kind of like feel off, and I say feel off. But the proper like scientific word is probably anxiety. And even though anxiety is a different form of excitement, and I understand completely, like whenever I feel anxious, I just write whatever it is that's. I don't write the cause of whatever it is that's making me feel this way, but what I do, and I intentionally do it, is I write down like this is happening, which means if anything I'm going to do towards it, I need to do this and this and this so that it doesn't make me feel this way. Or at the very least, I explain it fully. And that's I forgot what the law is, but like one law is there's some scientific law or just like a law that I actually like. The law that goes like this. I forgot the name of the guy that wrote it. What his name is. But the law is if you write down the problem clearly and fully, you're already halfway through solving it. And Einstein would say that all the time. Would say like, if you give me an hour to actually to do something, to fix a problem, or to give you a solution for a problem, I'll spend 55 minutes on the actual problem and 5 minutes on the solution. So the goal is to truly understand what's happening. And so what effectively I do is I kind of like sit with myself and especially when I'm feeling like a bit overwhelmed, and I go like, no, all right, so I'm feeling overwhelmed. This is going on. This is happening. This is happening. This is happening. So I believe this might be the cause or this might be the thing. And I kind of make these statements. And what happens in my own head, the way I actually envision it, is I kind of like pinpoint the things in my head and I create like a mini map of things that I can actually tangibly approach, tangibly, but like mentally approach and go like, okay, so like we have an issue and this might be the cause. At the very least, I know this might be the cause. So this would not come like from a hidden angle or from my blind spot anymore. Why? Because I actually see it. And funny enough, like almost every single time I'm going through something like this, I feel like it's 100% like very no, I want to say 100%. It's just like it takes me out of it. I come back to earth, and that's the best way to say it because I come back from my mind, from my mental state, and come back to earth. And as intense as it sounds, it's not really that big of a deal unless you actually allow it to consistently be the case. Like I don't really allow it to be the case beyond like a couple of hours or a minute or minutes or like something. But at one point I allowed it to be the case for like days. And that's basically when I came back from like West Africa, Liberia. Like when I came back, I was literally in one of those zony states where I'm always thinking, I'm always considering. And the fact that people around me were not trying to encroach on my space. People around me were really just not trying to encroaching on my space is heavy because that's literally how I felt in Liberia. And I lost my space, right? Like and I kept like slowly losing my space. And by the end of it I didn't have a house. I was like encroaching on somebody's space. Like my friends basically gave me a room and like their family to me and I love them and I miss them and I want to go there just to see them and all that stuff. But so when I came back, that mental state kind of stuck with me for like a couple of months. And the one thing that got me out of it was the fact that I started actually studying again, which gave me people to kind of engage with on the same train of thought, which allowed my mind to be like, oh, you could always find somebody that might be interested in having the same conversation with you. And but sometimes it's not the conversation you want to have. Sometimes it's a conversation they want to have. And it's fine because like learning that lesson just from finding a community to do something I want to do, which is like the fundamentals of programming, right? Like, the learning that and understanding that truthfully, like deeply. Like, we all know people only want to talk about what they're interested in. We all know that. We just don't understand how deep and profound that is, and how, like, they kind of like you, as much as them, most of the time reject the things that you're not actually having a conversation with. But anyway, so that I was like, we were having the conversation, and then at one point I was like thinking about it, and I'm like, when I was talking to him about anxiety, and I was talking to him about like every single time, because, and again, like recently, I've been more and more having open discussions about what's going on in my head, with the goal of trying to fully establish what's where I am. And that is a deeper understanding. If I'm actually having the discussion with myself, is a much deeper understanding of where my thoughts are coming from. But normally people kind of like sort out their thoughts first through like some form of meditation and all these kinds of things. Because like when you're actually like in a meditative zone, you kind of like elaborate on your mind elaborates on itself and dissipates the things that don't really fundamentally interact with your core. And that's beautiful because the honest truth of who we are and what we are will always kind of like stay the same. And even though sometimes we have like some discrepancies left and right, and again, like there's no right or wrong, there are some things that we kind of like would prefer not to have. We always could find a way to kind of like engage with them differently than in a way that doesn't make us feel good. And when I looked at him, I remember saying that I still probably have some fear and maybe some shame and disappointment from my past. And naturally, the first thing he was like, why? The first thing he said was, why would you actually like, why does it matter? And it really doesn't. And I've had this conversation with myself many times before. And I've actually pointed them out. Like, if you were to be ashamed, what would you be ashamed of? And I pointed them all out. And if you were to be like afraid, what would you be afraid of? And I pointed them all out. And what would I be disappointed in? And I pointed them all out. Disappointment was a whole lot of stuff. And it's just like really, even when you, even when you're okay and you forgive yourself, when you're disappointed with yourself, that means you disappointed a whole lot of things. And you don't have to be a bad person to disappoint people. You just kind of like don't do what's right. And my past started looking a lot more selfish the minute I started like reflecting on it. And that kind of like got me out of the anxiety and all the other stuff that I was actually looking that was actually making me feel bad, but also started creating the more like, the true self. My true self has been lost for so long that I'm so disappointed that it's been lost for so long. But I'm glad that I kind of right now I'm engaging through it and with it and how I am and how I've always been, but right now actually taking charge of it. Because before I was kind of like hoping for somebody to acknowledge that it exists, and or to acknowledge that it's okay for it to exist, but right now I'm kind of like over that kind of crap. So there's that feeling. I felt like I had to share it with them, which makes this the heaviest video I actually ever made. And after 165 videos, man, video 166 is the heaviest video ever made, simply because it's kind of like the blunt exposing the healed wound, and finally being able to kind of look at it and be like, if there was some damage done, it's already healed, and you can actually look at it right now instead of like hiding the fact that you were damaged. And the whole damaging part, again, like it's not real. Feelings are not real. We tend to kind of create them because we connect everything that we're doing. But let's face it, every day is separated by when you fall asleep and when you wake up. You can wake up a completely different person, and that could be okay. But the people that remember who you are will not really understand what's going on. But the reality is, you're still existing exactly the same as before. You're just kind of like no longer doing the same things, picking the same habits. And I think consciously, as we evolve on this earth, that's the change that we need to pursue. And ultimately, we have to believe it ourselves in order for it to be believable. And we have to be honest with ourselves, or else nobody would believe it, or the truth will eventually come out. And even those, and you can intentionally lie to yourself, or you can intentionally not be honest to yourself. These are two different things. And that's something maybe I'll discuss in the future. Intentionally lie, intentionally not be honest. But as for that, the conversation ended with me boldly stating that there's no point for me to kind of feel anything. But weirdly so, I hang on to that feeling because it helps me regulate. I don't think it helps me regulate anymore, but like anytime I'm making a decision, the first thing I'm thinking of is basically the wrong ones I did before. And I think it's about time I actually have a different approach that is more like pulling from the future instead of like pushing from the past. Right? Right? It's the difference between a jet plane that pushes up and a helicopter that kind of like, I'll get better at this later on. But pulling from the future or pushing from the past as well. These are two things I'm going to be writing about in the future.